is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and the former IDF spokesperson, retired Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. Also with us, the editor-in-chief and CEO of Zateo, Mehdi Hasan. Mehdi, I know you have an exclusive report about a letter that Republican senators sent to the International Criminal Court. We will get to that in just a few minutes, but I want to ask you about this reporting about Hamas saying publicly they've agreed to a ceasefire deal, but it's really kind of a counterproposal that they have that includes elements that they know Israel never agreed to. So was this some kind of propaganda effort by Hamas to say, we're at the table, we're agreeing to something?
Well, look, the reporting we have says that, yes, it was an Egyptian-Qatari proposal that the Americans were involved in too, Abby. The CIA director Bill Burns has been involved in this. The Israelis apparently were on board until, of course, Hamas agreed, and then the Israelis' bluff was called, and now they're saying, well, we don't agree to this proposal because we want to free the hostages, even though the proposal would help free the hostages.
Can I just pause you there for a second?
The Israeli newspaper.
I just want to add one bit of information I think is critical here. The part that Israel didn't agree to is the part that calls for a permanent end to the war. And I think this is really what is at issue here, that Israel has never agreed to that, and that maybe this is a counterproposal, but that means essentially that everybody has to get back to the table and agree to what is on the table now.
Yeah, but let me just say, in what world is Hamas going to say, we're going to release all the hostages and you carry on killing us? Obviously, outside world, America, Western countries has been wanting a ceasefire for a while. We were told Hamas was the obstacle, and now they're calling Israel's bluff. The reality is, Abby, that the obstacle to a hostage deal has always been Benjamin Netanyahu, and those are not my words. Those are the words of Chaim Rubenstein, the former spokesperson for the hostages' family, who told the Israeli press last week that Netanyahu's been the obstacle. He says that they found out there was a deal on the table back on October 9th, 10th, to get hostages released, but Netanyahu hid it from them. Those are the words of the spokesperson for the Israeli families of the hostages. And he hid it from them because he knows that if he agrees to a hostage deal, his fascist colleagues and his coalition government will collapse his government. This is Israeli domestic politics.
Lieutenant Colonel, what about that? I mean, if the hostages are all released, shouldn't Israel seriously consider ending hostilities in Gaza and allowing for a political settlement that leads to the future?
Yeah, I'm listening to the second edition of Mehdi Hasan's monologue that I saw earlier, and it's not surprising that you're parroting Hamas talking points. Let's put things here in perspective. We have a terrorist organization that abducted civilians and soldiers. They're the ones for the last 4 months have been refusing any deal that Israel, the US, Qatar, Egypt, and others have put forward. And now, when push comes to shove, and when they see Israeli tanks lined up on their way to Rafah, all of a sudden, they are agreeing. They're agreeing to something that wasn't on the table. And it's quite absurd that this is even how it's covered. And it's classic deception 101 by an organization that is very savvy in deception and unfortunately has figureheads and mouthpieces all over Western media doing their work, whether it's Al Jazeera or other places, and getting that message out that Israel is the problem when Israeli civilians and soldiers are the ones that have been abducted.
I'll let Mehdi respond to that.
So I think all of your viewers saw me quote the spokesperson for the Israeli hostages' families. And the colonel then said, I'm parroting Hamas talking points. He's referring to the hostages' families as Hamas, as parroting Hamas talking points, because I quoted them. I didn't quote Hamas. In fact, tonight, the colonel knows that hundreds of people went to Netanyahu's house and screamed, you have blood on your hands, Israeli protesters. I guess they're all Hamas, right? The Israeli position now is anyone who disagrees with them is Hamas. I'm guessing tomorrow they'll say CIA Director Bill Burns, who was involved in this hostage negotiation deal, he's Hamas too. Everyone's Hamas. And as for deception, I mean, come on. The colonel was a spokesperson for the IDF, which has spent the last 6 months lying. Abby, your network has debunked multiple lies that the Israeli military has told. CNN's Jeremy Diamond, I urge all your viewers to go and watch your colleague Jeremy Diamond's report on 10 kids killed in the Al-Maghazi refugee camp last month. The Israelis said we had nothing to do with it. And yet Jeremy interviewed 3 munitions experts who looked at the evidence and said, yeah, Israel killed those 10 kids. So when we talk about deception, we're learning from the masters here.
Look, Lieutenant Colonel, the hostage families are urging the government at this point to come forward and release the hostages as part of some kind of deal. One of the things that the families have said is that they feel like they are being abandoned. How do you respond to that, given that there are opportunities, it seems, to take a deal that would stop the fighting in exchange for getting their loved ones home? Lieutenant Colonel, I'm not sure you could hear me. Can you hear me now? I think we're going to try to get him back. But Mehdi, I do want to get back to one other aspect of this, which is from Israel's perspective, they want to make sure that Hamas is not in a position to ever attack them again. And I think you would agree that that's a reasonable position for them to have. So hostages all being returned, if they say that's not enough, I mean, Hamas, it seems like, shouldn't be in a position to be dictating the terms of their own surrender in a war that they started.
So it's a good question, Abby, and it's a reasonable goal. Of course it is. But if you don't want Hamas to be in a position to attack you again, maybe you shouldn't energize and embolden Hamas. This entire conflict has turned Palestinians in the entire region against Israel. It's made Israelis less safe, not more safe. It's obviously killed tens of thousands of Palestinians. And Israel has a right to say, OK, we don't want to be attacked again, but at what cost? 34,000 Palestinians dead, tens of thousands more under the rubble, 14,500 children dead, 1.2 million people hiding out in Rafah and now being told to move, to be relocated, 600,000 children. Abby, UNICEF say you cannot move 600,000 children, many of whom are sick, wounded, malnourished. They say it'll be a catastrophe. There is no safe zone to go to. It's the most Orwellian phrase that Israeli spokespersons use. There is nowhere safe in Gaza. So, of course, Israel wants to reasonably not be attacked again. But doing this doesn't work, and it's morally unsustainable.
Looks like we have Jonathan Conricus back. Lieutenant Colonel, I do want to talk about this Rafah invasion that seems to be on the horizon here. Our colleague Barak Ravid is reporting that sources tell him that Israeli forces are going to take over the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing between Egypt and Gaza. We're already seeing what seems like bombs falling there tonight. Why is Israel doing this when they know that there is no safe place, as Mehdi was saying, for civilians to go? And Rafah is the place that initially the Israeli government told them to go.
Yeah, I would take everything that my respected colleague to the panel here says with a lot of pinches of salt. Lots of untruths were said when I was on air and off air, and I won't give them credibility by repeating them. What I'll say is this. Rafah is a place where Hamas and UNRWA has told people to go. The sad reality in Gaza is that Hamas uses these civilians as human shields and doesn't leave Israel with any other option but to ask people to leave. Now, Israel is doing that out of concern for human life and their safety.
Lieutenant Colonel, I have to stop you there because the IDF told Gazan civilians to move to the south. Rafah was the only safe place, supposedly safe place, for them to go. So this is not about UNRWA. This is actually where they are going because the rest of the country is in rubble. So where are they supposed to go now?
Right. So there are various locations in Gaza, a few miles northeast of Rafah and northwest of Rafah, close to Khan Yunis, where they can go, and hopefully they will go. And I agree. I take the point that it is a harsh environment and not an ideal environment for anybody to live in. I wouldn't want to be there, to be frank. But the sad reality is that the responsibility for this situation lies on Hamas's shoulders. And I think that if we detach ourselves from agendas and ideas and Israel hatred, and if we look at the situation from a, let's say, a more clean perspective, what choice does Israel have? What choice does Israel have in order to defend its civilians in their homes? If Hamas is allowed to continue to exist, to store weapons, and to prepare for the next attack, then it is only a matter of time before these attacks will come. And those are not my words, Mehdi. Those are the words of Hamas leaders who say that we will do October 7 again and again until we reach Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And I don't think that Israel should allow that to happen. And if it means, sadly, moving people around before combat starts and making sure that they are safer, not safe, but safer, away from harm's way, by telegraphing Israeli intentions, then I think that is a very humane thing to do. Hamas sadly must be defeated.
We do. I do need to move on, but I just want to say one thing. I mean, this is not a question of hating Israel. It's a question of the reality on the ground, which is that there is already a humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Gaza, and there's no question that trying to move over 1 million people in short period of times is not going to be something that is feasible. But Mehdi, I have to get to your reporting, and I do want to talk.
Been proven wrong.
I do want to talk.
I don't agree, and that has been proven wrong.
You don't agree that there's a humanitarian catastrophe occurring right now in Gaza?
No, I don't agree. No, I don't agree that it cannot be done, because these were the same lines that were told. These were the same things that were told to Israel before Israel started its invasion of Gaza City. And believe me, I answered that question hundreds, if not thousands of times. And it was alleged that this was tantamount to war crime, that we were asking people to move, when in fact it was possible. 900,000 out of 1.1 million people did eventually move, and it saved a lot of people's lives. And I think that should be acknowledged. And the same talking points are being repeated now by the same Hamas mouthpieces.
Mehdi, you could respond.
Please go ahead.
NBC News reported last month, Abby, that 7 different airstrikes from Israel took place in what were designated as safe zones by Israel. Palestinians were told to go to safe zones by Israel and then killed in those safe zones by Israel. That's reporting from NBC News, but I'm sure the colonel would say they're Hamas as well. Everyone who disagrees with the colonel is Hamas. And by the way, he's quoting a Hamas spokesman. None of us like Hamas, but let's quote someone on his side, the Likud Party International Vice Chairman, Netanyahu's party. He said a couple of days ago, the Likud Party Vice Chair, Colonel, you can respond to this quote. The Likud Party Vice Chair, International Vice Chair, said on Israeli TV a couple of days ago, there are no uninvolved civilians in Rafah. No, there are no innocent people in Rafah, 1.2 million. No innocent people, and we should go in, these are his words, and kill and kill and kill. Sounds pretty genocidal to me, Colonel. Do you agree with that?
I agree that those are comments that are horrible and shouldn't be thought and shouldn't be said. And I'm happy that I don't have to explain the Likud party or whoever that is that you're sourcing, and haven't heard the quote. But I can tell you what the chief of staff, the guy that is responsible for the use of force in Gaza, and he speaks relentlessly about not killing civilians, and he gives orders not to kill civilians, and he gives orders and directives to the troops on the ground to apply distinction and to apply proportionality. And speaking about safe zones, yesterday 4 soldiers were killed when mortars were fired from Rafah, from a safe zone, at Israeli soldiers. And I'm sure that wouldn't bother you too much that 4 soldiers are killed, but they were killed, fired from a safe zone in Rafah. Happened yesterday. I don't have an MSNBC report to quote it, but it happened nevertheless.
All right, guys, I have to leave it there. Mehdi, you have some really important reporting about a letter from Republican lawmakers to the ICC about the possibility of arrest warrants for Israelis as it relates to war crimes. You can go onto Zeteo's website to find that reporting, but unfortunately we are out of time here. Mehdi Hasan, Jonathan Conricus, thank you both for an important conversation.